Soviet disk detected. To play the Allied missions, please insert the Allied disk.
Hello everyone, I'm a Broken Robot. When it comes to video game franchises that have fallen into obscurity, many nostalgic titles resurface online from time to time. Some include Bubsy the Bobcat, Medal of Honor, and Ridge Racer. While titles like these fell into obscurity for many reasons, including being outdone by rival franchises, or relying too heavily on emulating tropes and game designs from other video game titles, what happens when a franchise dies and then returns with a fresh new take on its franchise, reviving what was once a dead franchise? Well, my dear viewer, then you'd have a franchise like GWIMBLY. Before we can discuss how this beloved gaming franchise was revived in 2024, we need to discuss the rise and fall of GWIMBLY and how it returned and how it transcended this defunct gaming franchise into the new heights of popularity, beating out titles like Call of Duty and Cyberpunk 2077 in sales numbers. The GWIMBLY franchise first got its start all the way back in 1998. IGBG Game Studios was a small Australian-American game studio that had mostly built arcade cabinets during the video game boom of the 1980s. While the 1980s saw much growth for IGBG, during the late 90s traditional arcade cabinets were on the decline, and home consoles had eaten up most of their profits. After failed attempts to manufacture their own home consoles, IGBG CEOs decided that it was time to branch out into home titles. IGBG hired GWIMBLY as a corporate mascot. GWIMBLY would be a basic platforming title to compete with other popular titles like Sonic, Banjo-Kazooie, and Crash Bandicoot. GWIMBLY 1, released all the way back in 1998, was not a breakout success, only receiving fanfare with the recent resurgence of nostalgia for the franchise. The plot for the title was simple. GWIMBLY, who was a huge fan of creamed corn both in-game and in real life, was tasked with taking out Count Groxia and his army of creamed corn-stealing minions, who wanted to hoard it all for themselves. The game was divided into 4 sections, with Stage 1 being a jungle-themed level with more platforming-based obstacles than enemies, being fairly easy to progress through. Stage 2 was a desert-themed level, with more challenging enemies and environmental obstacles. The third and last major stage of GWIMBLY consisted of a city-themed level, which longtime fans of the franchise will remember for its brutally challenging platforming levels and game-breaking glitches that many IGBG coders blamed on GWIMBLY's rushed development. The game ended in the 4th stage, which was the shortest, only consisting of a single boss level. Here the player had to use their dodging and platforming skills to beat Count Groxia and free the creamed corn for all within GWIMBLY's world. Besides some glitches involving dodging in the 3rd stage and some criticisms about Count Groxia being a simple boss that's pretty easy to defeat compared to future bosses, GWIMBLY was received as a newly recognized video game mascot among most in North America. While GWIMBLY's initial title wasn't a breakout success, it did put IGBG games on the map, and the higher-ups were quick to pump out a sequel. In late 1998, GWIMBLY 2 was released for the original PlayStation, and also received ports for the N64 and Sega Saturn. GWIMBLY 1 infamously was only available on the PlayStation, and by branching out to other consoles, a wider market could be reached. GWIMBLY 2 had similar graphics to GWIMBLY 1, but had one major addition. Inspired by other video game mascots who often had sidekicks, GWIMBLY 2 introduced Mr. Millipede, GWIMBLY's faithful sidekick. In-game, Mr. Millipede allowed GWIMBLY to double jump and solve certain puzzles that required Mr. Millipede to reach areas or ledges and small pathways that GWIMBLY couldn't get through. Much like GWIMBLY 1, GWIMBLY 2 was comprised of 3 main stages and a 4th boss stage. Stage 1 was composed of a frozen forest, taking heavy inspiration from Mario 64, including penguin-themed enemies and creamed corn frozen in blocks of ice GWIMBLY had to jump on to free. Ice patches also added an extra layer of challenge to the game, with many game reviewers arguing that the first stage of GWIMBLY 2 was more difficult than all of GWIMBLY 1. GWIMBLY 2's plot starts out with GWIMBLY and Mr. Millipede searching for creamed corn, but at the end of Stage 1, GWIMBLY's old enemy Count Groxia returns to kidnap Mr. Millipede. Determined to save his pal, the second stage takes place in a mashup of jungle and desert themed levels from GWIMBLY 1 with different platforming and level designs. Without Mr. Millipede, GWIMBLY is forced to leave behind creamed corn, which you can come back for later in the game after rescuing him. This stage infamously introduced the Tumars, enemy robotic minions of Count Groxia determined to steal creamed corn. The third stage in GWIMBLY 2 takes place in a large industrial building that constructs Count Groxia's army of robot minions. Tumars dominate the hallways and ledges, making timing while platforming vital to progress. At the end of the third stage, you encounter a mini-boss in the form of a larger Tumar that has ranged attacks as well as ground pound attacks that were infamously difficult to dodge. After defeating this mini-boss, it's revealed that Count Groxia was using Mr. Millipede as the driver of this robotic enemy, controlling his mind by depriving him of creamed corn. After freeing Mr. Millipede, GWIMBLY and his pal take on Count Groxia once and for all in the fourth stage, taking place right on top of the robot factory. Similar to GWIMBLY 1, Count Groxia uses ranged attacks, but this time he's backed up by waves of his robotic Tumar minions. After defeating Count Groxia, at the end of the game, players have the ability to return to Stage 2 with Mr. Millipede to retrieve creamed corn in previous unreachable areas, adding a layer of replayability not found in GWIMBLY 1. GWIMBLY 2 was a major success, critically and commercially, with video game legends like Todd Howard and Gabe Newell crediting GWIMBLY 2 as a major source of inspiration when making titles like Fallout 3 and Half-Life 2. GWIMBLY 2 also reclassified IGBG Game Studios as a AAA developer, and from then on they were able to expand into other video game titles and franchises besides GWIMBLY. In the year 2000, GWIMBLY returned with GWIMBLY 64. In this title, GWIMBLY and Mr. Millipede returned to help out King Shmormu, a fictional character in the GWIMBLY franchise whose limited edition collection of creamed corn had been taken by Count Groxia, who was once again attempting to hoard all the world's creamed corn for himself. Unlike previous GWIMBLY games that had a linear style, GWIMBLY 64 famously had an open world aspect, allowing players to choose between 4 stages consisting of a jungle, desert, ice, and industrial area, consisting of 5 separate platforming levels with enemies old and new, including the robotic Tumars and the evil penguins, but also new enemies like the ding-dongs, suicide bomber enemies that were extremely difficult to dodge. Other popular enemies included the Chrysanel minions. These cyborg enemies worked for Count Groxia and could steal creamed corn GWIMBLY and Mr. Millipede had already collected in stages. Upon beating all 4 stages, players will once again be faced by Count Groxia, this time in a robotic mech suit that fires heat-seeking creamed corn missiles. Players have to maneuver and guide the rockets back into Count Groxia's mech to defeat him once and for all. While GWIMBLY 64 was a financial success, critics complained that the 4 stages were very similar to GWIMBLY 1 and 2. However, despite this, many praised GWIMBLY 64 for having a far more difficult final boss compared to GWIMBLY 1 and 2. In 2001, GWIMBLY returned in a radically new form. GWIMBLY 3 revolutionized the franchise, changing it from a simple platforming title to a shooter title. GWIMBLY 3 introduced the now iconic GWIMBLY gun and added the ability for Mr. Millipede to control some robotic enemies you'd encounter. In GWIMBLY 3, GWIMBLY and Mr. Millipede are kidnapped by Lord Groxia, the father of Count Groxia, seeking revenge for the defeat of his son. Unlike GWIMBLY 64, GWIMBLY 3 returned to a linear style, following GWIMBLY and Mr. Millipede as they escape from the prison they were placed in. After initiating a prison riot, GWIMBLY is forced to shoot his way out of prison, fighting not only Chrysanels and robotic Tumars, but fighting off fellow inmates like the Psycho Pebble gang members and the robotic Marcel gang members. While platforming is still a major part of GWIMBLY 3, it has a run and gun mechanic that adds a layer of action and intensity not found in other GWIMBLY games. Additionally, throughout the game you encounter 3 bosses, including the leader of the Psycho Pebble gang and the top dog of the prison, who was loyal to Lord Groxia, Galadro, a robotic version of the penguin enemies from GWIMBLY 2. The game ends much like GWIMBLY 2 with the prison top battle with Lord Groxia. GWIMBLY 3 was beloved by many, and the GWIMBLY gun would become a staple of the franchise from then on. Some issues occurred with some cans of creamed corn being very difficult to platform to, as well as secret levels being difficult to unlock without guides. Regardless of these minor flaws, GWIMBLY 3 sold a record amount of copies, being extremely popular abroad in places like Japan and Argentina. After the success of GWIMBLY 3, IGBG began work on GWIMBLY's first spin-off title, GWIMBLY Creamy Capers, for the Nintendo DS, released in December of 2004. Creamy Capers was a side-scroller shooter that saw GWIMBLY platforming through an industrial-themed level, fighting off evil robotic forms of GWIMBLY as he collected creamed corn. This game reintroduced Count Groxia, retconning his death at the end of GWIMBLY 64. This game was infamous for its difficulty, and since the Nintendo DS was advertised for younger gamers, many found GWIMBLY Creamy Capers too difficult, and the sales tanked after the first month of release. The game lacked key characters like Mr. Millipede and iconic enemies like Tumars and Ding Dongs, but hardcore GWIMBLY fans enjoyed the spin-off as a fresh take on the franchise, but it had lost its mass appeal, leading some critics claiming that the GWIMBLY franchise had jumped the shark. This criticism would be vindicated in 2005 when the second GWIMBLY spin-off title, GWIMBLY Kart, was released on all consoles. GWIMBLY Kart followed a Mario Kart style with iconic characters like GWIMBLY, Mr. Millipede, Count Groxia, and Galadro racing each other in go-karts on various themed tracks. The game saw new versions of the GWIMBLY gun introduced, such as banana, ice, and lightning versions of the GWIMBLY gun, which players could use to fight each other while driving. The game was popular among longtime GWIMBLY fans, but was labeled as a Mario Kart ripoff by general audiences, and infamously received a little fanfare upon release. After the financial failure of GWIMBLY Kart, IGBG took a step back, and would spend the next 2 years making a more traditional GWIMBLY title. In 2008, GWIMBLY returned with GWIMBLY 4, The Revenge of GWIMBLY. This game was the largest of any title, featuring 5 separate stages, as well as side content like minigames, and even included a few ported maps from GWIMBLY 64. The title followed Mr. Millipede and GWIMBLY protecting the creamed corn factory from gangs of creamed corn stealing enemies, with each of the 5 stages having their own respected enemies, ranging from the classic 2 Mars to the robotic versions of GWIMBLY found in GWIMBLY Creamy Capers. The 5 stages included iconic areas from the GWIMBLY franchise, like jungle, desert, city, industrial plant, prison, and snow forest. IGBG developers had spent a small fortune on advertising, and back in 2008 it was pretty hard to ignore the wave of GWIMBLY ads, both online and on TV. While GWIMBLY 4 was advertised as the peak of the franchise, fans complained about the new GWIMBLY gun mechanics, forcing players to rely more on basic jumping attacks rather than being able to run and gun like in GWIMBLY 3. Additionally, GWIMBLY 4 saw Mr. Millipede relegated to a tutorial character, which upsetted many longtime fans of the franchise. The lack of a final boss battle or even mini-bosses made the game's ending feel rushed. Even with the long development, many critics claim that IGBG rushed GWIMBLY 4 into the market for the fourth quarter sales to bank on Christmas buying. GWIMBLY 4 was a critical and financial failure that permanently damaged IGBG's reputation in the gaming sphere. In 2012, a 5th GWIMBLY sequel was planned called GWIMBLY Forever, but after issues behind the scenes, GWIMBLY the actor cancelled his contract with IGBG and planned to start his own solo career. IGBG would go on to create new franchises outside the GWIMBLY universe, and despite the popularity of previous titles, GWIMBLY left the public conscious for many years. Even when Mr. Millipede, a fan-favorite character, tragically died from a fentanyl overdose in 2021, many fans only caught wind of the tragic death of an iconic video game star in 2024. From 2012 to 2024, GWIMBLY attempted to form a partnership with Nintendo, Microsoft, and even Sega, with all deals falling through. Luckily for GWIMBLY, in 2024 the IGBG CEO had passed away under mysterious circumstances, and the new CEO, a character named Troglor, invited GWIMBLY back for a dynamic fighting game. In February of 2024, GWIMBLY Smash Bros. Was released for the Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PlayStation 5, being a huge critical and financial success. The game followed iconic characters like GWIMBLY, the 2 Mars, the evil penguins from GWIMBLY 2, fighting one another on various staged maps alongside new characters like Troglor, Mr. Boss, and O.J. Simpson. In 2024, the mixed legacy of the GWIMBLY franchise has been redeemed in the eyes of both longtime fans and people just discovering the GWIMBLY franchise. Many have gone back to titles like GWIMBLY 2 and GWIMBLY Creamy Capers to relive some of the most iconic moments in the franchise. I'm happy to say that thanks to the success of GWIMBLY Smash Bros., time will only tell what new directions IGBG games will take and what's in store for our beloved hero GWIMBLY. But what do you guys think? Do you also have fond memories of playing GWIMBLY back in the day, or are you a newer fan that discovered GWIMBLY through his successful new titles? I'd be more than happy to discuss in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video and maybe even learned something new. If you like what you see, feel free to like and subscribe. If you leave a like, not only does it let me know that you guys want more content, but it helps me out personally in the YouTube algorithm, so hey, thanks a bunch. If you subscribe, you won't miss out on my future video essays, reviews, and commentary on a wide range of topics. I cover everything from old video games to defunct store brands, so there's always something for everyone here on the Broken Robot Show. Feel free to join the Robot Factory today. I hope you all have a great day, always keep your GWIMBLY gun on you, and stay cool.